Hi sweeties, how are you doing? Welcome to Naya Sing or Cimnanya, and thank you all so much for all the love and support. Hope you all are doing great. Today we'll be talking something very important, and it's about a video that I saw, and I was like, this is really very interesting because a lot of people thought African American history started with slavery. The reality is that a lot of black people were like doing absolutely great before they picked them up from wherever they picked them up and all that, and that they have this mindset that black people are not smart, they are unintelligent and genetically not so sound and all that. The truth is that most of the people they picked out there were the very best. They picked doctors like traditionalists. They picked they picked the doctors, they picked the lawyers, they picked kings, they picked queens, right? And they brought them over and they started maltreating them, right? And now they keep saying that CRT is it is not good enough to be taught in school because it hurts their feelings. Why is it that you all are not ready to speak the truth? Because I personally feel like when you are not ready to speak the truth, it means that you are not ready to talk. Because when you want to speak the truth or when you want to talk, you have to start with the truth. So I am saying that they should tell themselves the truth. The reality is that most of them know, but they are trying as much as they can to cover all this up because a lot of lies has been told and they are still standing on that lies trying to cover it up. That was why they all of a sudden they came up to say that slavery benefited slaves. Let's get into
what a lot of people don't get is that the blacks wait, hold on.
Gotta go right now. Gotta go.
Sometimes I have to just remove myself from the situation because I'm just such in shock that even those words came out of someone's mouth.
How should you deal with racists? That is a fascinating question, and I guess it depends upon two things. One, what is your objective? And two, to what ends are you willing to go? Someone commented on the video and said, don't leave, call them out. And she proceeded to explain that she does call people out, but she also acknowledged that confrontation is not one size fits all. She was looking for suggestions on how other people handle that situation. Now, while I get the point that the commenter was trying to make that leaving is not necessarily a direct condemnation of the behavior, it is still absolutely making a statement. So whenever you're in a situation like this where it's all white people in a social gathering and someone says something racist, you're going to feel the energy shift, and one of a couple things is about to happen. Either someone's going to agree and validate their opinions, give them the approval that they were seeking, or no one's going to say anything and they're going to immediately begin trying to qualify their statement, or someone's going to challenge them and they're going to get defensive. So we're going to focus on the final two scenarios. You're at a party, it's strangers, some acquaintances. There's a group of you, 5, 6, 7 people. Nobody knows each other. Everybody's talking, conversing. Someone says something racist, and that awkward silence falls over the group. And it's at that point where you will sometimes, more often than not, they will just silently, wordlessly turn around and they'll exit that circle. They'll leave that group, that conversation. And in that moment, everybody who's in that circle knows exactly what's happened. That them walking away was a statement of condemnation for the behavior, that what you said was reprehensible enough that it deserves to be ostracized. Now, the energy after they leave is awkward, and it's felt by everybody because there's a implication that if you're not leaving or that you aren't challenging them, that you are tacitly co-signing their racist statement. And so more often than not, you'll see the group kind of break up as a whole. People will make excuses and they'll go their separate ways. And you'll have maybe the one or two who silently agreed with them. They'll begin to stand there, converse about the subject, and form their own echo chamber. I want to offer some measure of defense for the leavers because it's easy to vilify them after the fact, like, oh man, you should have called them out. But the truth is that not everybody's built for confrontation. Not everybody has the emotional control. Not everybody has the information and verbal skills to be able to articulate their position in a way that's going to appropriately challenge them, because make no mistake, we're in a social situation, and in a social gathering, debate is a spectator sport. If you don't feel as though you have the ability to be able to challenge them and convince them otherwise, which more often than not you're not going to be able to, but if you don't feel as though you have the ability to convince everybody around you watching the debate, well then it's probably best that you don't engage them, because you run the risk of doing more harm than good. In that situation, I would say that what you did was an appropriate response, and it does convey the message that you were trying to get across. Now let's move on to those of us who don't mind the confrontation and who are happy to challenge them in that moment. We recognize that debate is a spectator sport, and I can't wait to start teaching people. Remember, I said on the front end that it's important to identify two things. One, your objective, and two, how far you're willing to go. More often than not, you're not going to be able to convince the person who said the racist thing that what they did was racist. If they understood or were capable of critical thought or engaged in critical thought regularly, they probably wouldn't have said the racist thing. What you're engaging with them for is so that everybody around you understands who the actual expert on the subject matter is and whose opinion needs to be disregarded. That is your objective. Now, they're going to start with faulty logic and premises that aren't based in reality. You're going to need to be able to counter them with real-life examples, historical and factual data, and your own complete logic. Again, we're not trying to convince them. The majority of people around you will be able to tell who's using what. Now, at some point, this is naturally going to devolve into a circular spiral where they just keep repeating the same talking points, the same straw man, the same logical fallacies. And at that point, you have one of two options. You can either choose to disengage, making sure that everybody knows, like, hey, there is no point in engaging with them if you're trying to come to a meaningful conclusion on the topic, or you can allow it to escalate. See, once we've reached this part in the game where I've made it exceedingly clear that you don't know what the fuck you're talking about and I'm the subject matter expert between the two of us, and you continue to argue with me, that's when I'm going to emphasize the gap that's between us. And that's when people's pride get in the way. I learned a long time ago that if you're going to be out here telling racists they're stupid, you should probably be prepared for it to escalate to violence. Which, if y'all haven't seen the video of me and the white supremacist, it's the one that's marked sensitive content, y'all should go check that out. Again, this is why it's critical that you identify your objective and the links that you're willing to go to. Because once you've accomplished your objective, if you don't possess the strength of your convictions to go throw hands with a hillbilly in the front yard, you should not be allowing this to escalate to a place of violence. Disengage a couple steps ago. All right, you did what you came to do. To close, I want to emphasize that these are my social strategies, and I don't want to project my confidence or my propensity for confrontation onto other people and insist that you do the same. It's enough to be a lever. It's enough to make a statement that the behavior is reprehensible and it doesn't belong in civilized society. As always, it's a great time. Thank y'all for rocking with me. Y'all have a good one. Well, I got time today. Let me make it clear that I'm not out here trying to save black people. I'm trying to save the working class. I'm trying to save labor. I'm trying to save poor people, and that includes you. All right? Black people don't need me to save them. What they need is for the largest voting bloc in America to acknowledge that the capitalist conditions that create poverty in their communities are the same conditions that create poverty in our communities. If you've never lived in a community that has 30 to 40% of its population living at or below the poverty level, let me try to explain it to you. It is shit education. It is the absence of middle-class jobs. It is little to no upward economic mobility. It is the lack of financial stability. It is people living paycheck to paycheck. It's $15 to $20 an hour jobs, and the moment you've been doing it long enough to expect a raise, they're going to fire you, and they're going to bring in someone else. And it's done deliberately to keep you from ever moving upwards in life. It's done purposefully to keep you from achieving financial stability, because if you achieve stability, maybe you'll have enough money to engage in the entrepreneurial spirit of America, and that results in competition for them. You might have enough money saved up to be able to survive a labor dispute for 2 months. You can go on strike and not have to worry about losing your house in the meantime. That's a problem for them. Living in an impoverished community is to always be in the presence of drugs and crime. They are inextricable from each other. Anytime that you have high poverty, you're going to have drugs and crime. It's no separating it. Maybe you're okay with Americans living in these artificially created conditions that only benefit corporations. I'm not. I'm tired of seeing people I care about slave away every day, spend their whole life. You get one go round on this planet, and they spend their whole life getting nowhere, making scraps, while people make billions of dollars and pretend that they can't take a billion less in order to pay people in middle class wages that are going to allow them some financial stability. Maybe I do have a white savior complex. I'm out here trying to save white people from themselves. What I'm looking at is a trauma response, all right? You've been abused your whole life, and the moment someone tries to love you, you're rejecting, you're pulling back. But it's okay. I'm not going to give up on you. I'm going to work for you even if you don't want me to. I'm going to do what's best for you. I'm going to do what's best for your children, and I'm not going to stop. What I want you to do is believe in me. Believe in me. I'm genuinely excited that you asked this question, because it gives me the opportunity to expound upon this concept a little bit. So I want to start on the front end by acknowledging that the social construct of whiteness here in America is real, and that there are inherent benefits to being born white in a country that has its origins rooted in white supremacy. That said, I've been able to disassociate myself from the identity of whiteness, in that I do not derive any of my personal identity from the fact that my skin lacks melanin. I want to be explicitly clear when I state that whiteness is not real, and that whiteness only exists in the presence of blackness or in the presence of other communities of color. One of the things that I observed growing up in an all-white community is that there is no meaningful solidarity around whiteness. When I look back across my childhood and I examine the times that my family was going through hardship, and I identify the people who were in a position to help us but ultimately chose not to, or in some circumstances deliberately went out of their way to make our lives more difficult, what I find is that it's exclusively old white people. What I found in these instances is that even though they were white and we were white, that whiteness did not provide any sense of connection to the point where they felt obligated to help us. And that's what you'll find anytime that everybody in the room is white, that whiteness does not provide a strong enough connection to overrule any of their individual self-interests. Clearly, the identity of whiteness has some appeal, some allure. If you don't believe me, go ask Enrique Tarrio. In fact, the only time that you'll see that whiteness has a meaningful binding effect is when people gather together for the express purpose of celebrating said whiteness. Now, these are all observations that I've taken from my personal life experience, but we can also pull from historical evidence examples that show that whiteness is a contrivance. As Theodore Allen points out in his book, The Invention of the White Race, whenever the first Africans showed up at Jamestown in 1619, there were no white people whenever they showed up. In fact, the word white wouldn't show up in colonial records for another 60 years. At that time in history, there were English, Irish, French, German, Austrian, Russian, Prussian. They were a nationality. They never referred to themselves as white. It wasn't until 1680 that the concept of whiteness became prevalent in the cultural lexicon, and that's a direct result of the colony of Virginia legislating whiteness into existence in response to Bacon's Rebellion, which was a labor uprising comprised of an alliance of European indentured servants and African indentured servants and slaves. The ruling class of Virginia was incredibly concerned about this alliance, and it culminated in the Slave Codes of 1705, which created a social separation between Europeans and Africans. It ensured that Europeans could never be subjected to lifetime servitude, and it ensured that African slaves could never be free. The social separation was deliberately created by the aristocracy to ensure that they wouldn't have to contend with future labor uprisings, and it's existed in some form or fashion ever since. So once you've examined all of this and you've identified that whiteness isn't real and that it's always existed as a barrier to class solidarity, it becomes incredibly easy to separate yourself from the identity of whiteness.
It's time not only to change the narrative, but start telling the truth. It's time for kids to know, all kids of all kinds, and grown-ups to know, of all kinds, that black history didn't start with slavery. If you haven't introduced your students to Anthony Browder's Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, you haven't done your students a fair job. If you haven't introduced your students to the book Stop Falling for the Okie Doke, you haven't done your students a fair job. It's time for these kids to hear from Robert Wald Sussman's book, which is The Myth of Race, that this whole thing is a myth, and it's time to stop believing the myth, and it's time to stop teaching the myth, and it's time to realize that blacks were doing cataract surgery with metal instruments before there were hospitals in Europe. It's time to realize that blacks were intelligent, creative, adventurous, curious, brilliant people before you white folks evolved. It's time to start teaching the truth. If we don't start teaching the truth pretty soon, people, we're in really big trouble. It's time to start teaching the truth. Now, white people aren't going to be happy with those truths, but eventually they'll be better off. Eventually they will realize that they have been myth-read for the last 400 years. It's time to give up the myth. It's time to tell the truth in history. People, what were the names of Columbus's 3 ships? People, Vine Deloria says he left the old country with 4 ships, but 1 fell off the edge. Now, it makes as much sense to tell that as it does to tell that Columbus discovered America. People, you can't discover a place where people are already living. They discovered it before you got there. It's time to demythologize the schools and history. We are not teaching history, we're teaching hysteria. It's time to start teaching the truth. You could make a huge difference just by doing that for 1 day at a time. Just 1 day at a time. If you tell your kids something they have never heard before, and they go home and tell it to their parents, especially, as mine did, and one of the parents was the head of the school board, it changes the way that system operates. Because that parent has to start thinking in new ways in order to get along with that kid. You want to make home uncomfortable, people, by telling the truth. We need some discomfort.
I am not sure they are ready to tell the truth, because if they are ready to tell the truth, they wouldn't start banning books. Sorority is not good enough. It is African American history is violent and shouldn't be taught in school. Some books needs to go, and the rest of it. There is nothing like woke. Woke is where some places are where woke goes to die, and they are going to eradicate woke and put it in the dustbin of history. There is nothing. Whew. So the truth is that some of them are not ready to tell the truth. That's why they've been dancing around trying to cover up things. All of a sudden, slavery benefited slaves, and they were also able to learn skills and all that. And when they know the reality, the truth that all these were lies, the fact that they wake up every day to make up lies just to suit them or to, like, make them look good, all this while and all this period, they've been trying to finesse, like, make it look like it was a great thing that happened, or it was like, it was how did they say that, like, we were given an opportunity to live, like African Americans were given an opportunity to live in a modern world, or live in a better world, instead of living in a third world country. That was what, like, some of them say, that it is time you all pick yourselves up and stop complaining about what happened how many years ago. But the reality is that some of them, they have refused to acknowledge the fact that it happened 100 years ago, or 1 year ago, or 2 years ago, and it is still happening. If I said that nothing changed, I might be lying, but not, like, a lot of things also did not change. Some things changed, some did not change, I said that in the sense that the people that really that experienced slavery can really tell better, and some of us are not experiencing it firsthand, but indirectly we are experiencing it. Redlining, Jim Crow, like a whole lot of it, right? So they are not ready to speak out. They are not ready to talk about it. They are not ready to speak the truth, because the truth hurts, and they do not want their kids to know what they did. They do not want, like, they do not want to expose themselves. They do not want all this to be out. But the reality is that a lot of people are waking up. People are kind of woke. A lot of people are reading. A lot of people are following African American, like, pages on TikTok, learning a whole lot, reading books, and at the same time making research on YouTube and all that. Some of them are also beginning to understand why Black people are kind of not wanting to also mix up and all that, because all these years they've been lying against us, like, the lies they told and all that. And it is amazing how they are so big, they are already super big on social media, PR and all that. That was one of their, like, one of the things they killed us with, because first of all, what they knew that what they did was really very horrible, and how did they, like, how did they save the moment, or how did they save the whole period and all that? First of all, they had to tarnish my own people's image to other people. Because if you look around, it looks like some of the things they told us were also the things they told other people, but probably in a different way and in a different tone and all that. But yeah, so that was the propaganda they used against my own people till this very moment. Just that some people are beginning to understand better on learning, deconstructing, and the rest of it. But then I keep saying it, you all will eventually, like, speak up and speak out, because you all are hiding, trying to, like, like, cover up everything. But the truth is that you cannot cover the sun. When it is time for the sun to shine, it shines. When it is time for the moon to, so there is no how you try to hide it. You cannot hide it, right? African American history is well documented, that when you pick up your book and all that, you see everything there, and the rest of it. So I am happy that a lot of people are beginning to deconstruct, trying to understand better. Like the other man said, he's not speaking because he wants to save Black people. He cannot save us. And that is on period, right? And also, a lot of them, like, said some horrible things about Black people. I understand that some people do not want to confront. Some people just want to let it go. But I am of the opinion that if you are in a very good position to confront some people, because some people, all they need is just to be confronted to reset their brain. So keep resetting their brain. See you all in my next video. Bye for now.